you just don't have to worry about it. You know that they care about running cleanly as much as you do, and that's really ideally what you want, because you're not going to convince people to practice. You notice this throughout the game. There's two kinds of attitudes in this game.
Hey guys, so I spent the last season of Alliance War in the Scrolls, and it was led by Cade. He's a fellow YouTuber. We've had some conversations about doing some stuff together, and the podcast definitely was one of them. And I wanted to just pick his brain because I saw firsthand as a member in that alliance how much work goes in to maintaining that status, trying to stay or push into the master bracket or tier 1 or whatever your goals are. As an officer in an alliance in the top 0.1% of this game, it's an insane amount of work, and Cade had a very good insight into that world, because he did this for a long time and took an alliance that ranked Platinum 3 in Season 2 and made that into a Master Alliance. So anyway, this is a great conversation that's gonna feel a little bit quickly, maybe a little rushed at times, but we wanted to get it all done in under an hour, so that was the idea. So enjoy. Okay, so yeah, the goal here is, I think, to pick your brain, because you took an alliance. I think you might be unique in this, of being one of the fastest growing alliances, from Plat 2 to Master, right, in one season. Was that it?
Yeah,
pretty crazy.
So because we split into a family, technically, I like to say that because we were Plat 2 at the end of the season before, trying to push back up to Plat 1, and we had some terrible luck matching alliances that had gotten docked, that master level alliances, which cost us a boss clear, and we ended up, after facing a few of them, in spot 1 of Plat 3. But we were a Plat 2 alliance. It just got really unlucky.
But technically, so the idea is here is the reason we're going to be talking is what does it take to build a master alliance, and Cade is our sort of resident expert on that, because let's just, Plat 3, okay, ranking. I know you guys were Plat 2, probably Plat 1 worthy, but you were ranked Plat 3, and you went all the way to Master in one season.
Dude, I'm excited. I feel crazy. Like I do have to preface it by saying, because we were fairly certain towards the end of the season, I was like, I want to split this into a family. We had a solid group with Invaders, which was the original Scroll Alliance. But we knew if we were going to push Master, I think that's the trickiness at tier 2, tier 3.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants to push harder, Not everybody has the resources to boost, and not everybody's playing quite at the same skill level. It's just the nature of the beast.
So how do you?
And so we knew.
How do you go about setting that goal for the group? What's the driving force there? Is it the Master rewards, or is it the reputation you're going to get? Are you maybe?
I think it's the goal.
It's just the personal achievement, right? Just we did it.
I think so. I think it's saying I can do this. Like, why wouldn't I? I'm used to leading an alliance. Like, I know how to lead an alliance. It's just a matter of, we never in the old Scrolls had a hard skill requirement. Whereas we were like, you know what? There's a group of us, maybe about half, that would really like to push from, I don't know what Plat 3 is. It's probably the top 1 or 2%. To the 0.1% or whatever, It's just, there's certain people, I think, in this game that are gluttons for punishment. They're like, no, I want to keep pushing. I want to push harder. Let's see what we can accomplish. And so there was a good group of us that, or a good number of us that were like, we would like to push more. So let's do this. Let's instead of doing something that people might feel like creating a feeder and saying, hey, everybody that's not wanting to play at a master level, go there. We were like, let's start our own thing.
Yeah.
Let's try to find a shell. Let's not put anybody that's already in this alliance in a tough spot. They're going to keep going, business as usual. They ended up in Plat 3. Nothing changed for them. But we're like, let's take our group of guys. We knew we had about half that could play at a high Plat 1 master level. We knew we'd be at a disadvantage defender-wise because we had spent the first 2 seasons in Plat 3. But there were a lot of alliances. The alliances we were facing were placing each person had at least one 565 they were placing. I feel like when we were facing master alliances.
So it comes to recruitment. If you have half of a team, that you need to fill the other half with like-minded people, huh?
Agreed. I think that was
one of the harder parts of leading.
Once we had our initial 15. We had to fill the rest up very quickly because we didn't have a lot of time. We had acquired that shell. It was MCH, and they had all moved elsewhere. And one of our members knew Slow Crimson, who was the leader at the time, and so we acquired them. But we knew we didn't have much time, so took 2 or 3 days. We had some great officers that were very well connected in the community. Like I know people, but man, watching guys like Crimson Fog and Richie and stuff, just I don't know, pull all the favors to say, okay, who's looking for an alliance, who wants to do this master push with us, and fill this alliance up. I think in 2 days we went from, I don't know, maybe we were somewhere between 15 and 20 to full 30.
And what are you guys looking for
on their part?
What are you guys looking for in these people, in these recruits?
So our main thing was obviously many of them came from other master alliances. They'd either taken a break or what have you. We had a few ASR guys. Richie was from 4 Loki.
So experience.
Wood, he came in later in the season. He was from 4 Loki. So a lot of guys that had maybe taken a break. We wanted people that were going to be able to clear cleanly. We knew that was going to be our advantage, because we were at a disadvantage defender-wise. They had to have decent rosters. I think we took on one person that, and I didn't realize it until afterwards, didn't have a 565 yet. And we were like, oh, wow. This is not, like, when are you doing this, like, when are you finishing up, or when are you, like, he was going through Labyrinth or something, and he knocked it out in like a day, and things were okay. But generally it was guys who had a couple 565s, and we knew had the skill to run cleanly, because that was the whole premise of this. Like, we're gonna have an alliance that has a skill requirement. No hard feelings if you can't clear the stuff we need. We're gonna give you every advantage we can, but we've got a 2-month timeline, to go from we're not an alliance to being in master. And so we had to really kind of pay attention closely and say, okay, this is kind of the expectation. And if you're just in a little over your head, obviously it's no hard feelings, but we'll have to bring somebody else in. And we try to do it with heart. Not a lot of alliances do, but it's a tricky balance.
Definitely. Well, were there any? I'm sure you got more recruits than you actually needed, right? So like, were there any? What were like the watch outs? Like, I don't feel like you have to talk bad about anybody, but no. What were the things that say like, oh, you know what, this person is just not gonna cut it. We really can't take this person on because X. Like what were some of those?
Initially, it was roster based and experience based. Like, have they been playing at Master or Plat 1 at least? We know we can work with that. Eventually, it shifted over to where boss killing videos took priority.
Okay.
So if you had boss kills, then we knew that they were going to be decent. And I know a lot of other alliances do the same thing, because there are always applicants and there's always guys with impressive rosters, but you don't know if they're actually like the best resume is, what have you done at a high level before, Yeah. And because we had some high-end players that came in that I thought, I'm never going to have to worry about these guys. And they kind of they surprised me where you could rely on them to die. And I'm saying this in the nicest way possible. There was no hard feelings or anything, but you have these expectations like, oh, they're coming from a high alliance, but they were dying every war at least once, maybe twice. And so really it's just, what can they show you? That's the big thing. And then you learn once they are members, people set themselves apart. There's people who make officers' jobs much easier, and there's people who make officers' jobs much tougher, just by their willingness to, and their competitiveness, and they're like, okay, I've got this note, I've never taken this path, but man, I'm studying my butt off because I don't want to be the guy, that loses the bonuses.
Yeah.
So
the experience seemed to trump everything else.
I think if you can show that you've done the job before, right, and that you can play at a high level, because a lot of it can be nerves at this level. People are coming in from lower tiers and they're like, what do I do?
I can testify to the nerves, man. It's there's a lot of pressure. I think it's funny that you're saying experience, because I was probably one of your recruits that didn't have any experience in Plat 1 or Master.
There were a few guys that we took kind of bets on, because we're like, well, we know. I think it's funny. You get a few guys where you watch them in Labyrinth and they're just crushing because they're confident. Mm-hmm. You know they're good players, but then you see them in War and it's just the nerves.
Yeah,
they psych themselves out. They're like, well, I don't know. I've never done this before. Well, the truth is, if you're running tier 1, 2, or 3, you're running the same maps. Like, yeah, you're going to face more 565s and stuff, but the maps don't change, you know? And so I think that's the big thing, is just getting people to kind of calm down. And it was tough to navigate. I think a lot of it was just like, you're trying to be very no nonsense in the way you're building stuff up, but you also are getting these players that are not used to that master thing. And you want to give them all the confidence they need. You know they're good enough, It's just that you need to nurture that to just be like, come on. There's one person in particular I'm thinking of who had a rough couple wars initially. And I remember DMing and being like, dude, you belong here. Like, you're fine. Like I see you, the way you run your lab paths, you're fine. Like you're really, like, you beasted in there. Just if you relax. And dude, he was one of the easiest to manage players for the remainder of the season. I think it's just confidence was a big part of things.
Yeah, leadership skills, man. Building people up where they need it. Every person kind of responds differently to different leadership strategies.
I agree. And I think you and I talked about it some during the season, but it was a tough balance for me because I'm always the nurturing guy. I'm always the rah-rah guy. And this season, I was just like, how do I toe this line? Like, I had some bad experiences last season with being too like, hey, we're doing great, and then people start dying, and you're like, okay, that was too
for people outside the alliance. Cade was very, he was a militant. I feel positive attitude, but oh my god, if we weren't getting every 2 or 3 hours a message like, guys, don't let up. It was good. It was inspirational.
I felt like I had to say, like, somebody would post something and be like, hey, pretty good so far, and I'm like,
no,
yes, but. I gotta
get your head out the clouds, soldier.
Exactly. I'm like, we're only halfway. Let's go. Like, let's clean it up.
Okay.
But I don't know. I was like, if I have to be the pain in the butt and people, dislike me, at least, we will have gotten our master rewards. I'll be the one celebrating the most once the season's over.
Well, that's good. That's what we're trying to get at. We're trying to figure out what it takes here. So, like, okay, so you've managed to get 30 members. And then it seems like you've got more or less the team you want. I want to just spend just a couple minutes, like real quick, on the preseason. So you to build to master, you wanted to start the season in a particular spot with a particular war rating. So just go over your strategy and how you ended up there.
We didn't know exactly where we wanted to be as far as that war rating. I think we didn't tank at all during the offseason. We couldn't afford to. Our shell, I think, was started at 650 or something. We knew we had to push that up to close to 3K, if not over.
Yeah.
And to add insult to injury, we pushed up, and then we had a member get a temp ban. He didn't know what reason it was for, and we got docked for it. Now, because you were in the Alliance, I don't think anyone was more no nonsense about, like, we don't tolerate any sort of poop when it comes to
very
this
above
stuff.
The board.
So it surprised me a lot. I remember talking to somebody who was going to come in, and they were like, hey, I thought you guys were over 3K. This was after our initial push in the offseason. Thank God for the longer offseason. Yeah. I mean, I know the heating was a pain, but it gave us the time we needed because we were sweating being able to get this rating up in time. Because you really need that tier 1 multiplier. You need it, and you need it for most of the season.
Right. So it's getting into tier 1 is really the goal. And then do you want to go much higher into tier 1, or you want to sort of hover around there? You
kind of want to hover. I think the for us, and we had good, I remember Cam like asking like, what do you think? What's your opinion? Where should we go to? And I remember him saying on stream, like, just stop one win short of tier 1. And I was like, okay, we'll go with that. I mean, I trust Cam's judgment on so much stuff. And so this was brand new to all of us. We were all kind of playing by ear, and we didn't want to tank. So after the 2 pushes, after that weird docking thing, and then having to push up again, it was nonstop. we stopped what we thought was 1 win short of tier 1, because we're like, you know what? If you win your first one, it's in tier 2, and then win your other ones because maybe you're getting more favorable matchups because of rating. Mm-hmm. Who knows? Again, we're not big.
You were just making
tankers.
some speculation, yeah.
We were just trying. Yeah, you win your first 3, then all of a sudden you're in, just on points, you're in master, and we saw this when it ended up happening, and then you just have to maintain, but you've got a rating where you're not in the 3300s or something, which obviously there's more to talk about with that, because it there's teams that are in the 3300s that didn't face very many master alliances,
right.
you know.
So as far as items and boosts and stuff go, it's whatever it takes. You decide whether or not you need to win a war, and then you play accordingly. You boost and heal up accordingly.
Exactly. In the off season, and we knew for us the pressure was on because we had to push the rating up, and so we were like, we got to tier 1, then the dumb docking thing, and then we pushed up again. We had to get up to 3K, and so. And a lot of times
the match that you have helps determine that, right? So if you're in a preseason war and you come up against a plus 90 minus 2, you're thinking this might not be the best investment of resources, right?
Definitely. And I think we face ASR and we're like, well, we're not pushing this. We're not pushing this war. You know, like we'll just get as many constellation shards as we can, and we're not gonna push. It was when we were placing a good number of 345 still. It was right before the season we got organized and said, okay, these are the key rank ups we need in each BG. And I think our organization was probably a huge thing when it comes to that stuff. We can talk about that later if you're interested. But definitely. I think it definitely. But having said that, aside from the 2 wars we took completely off, we didn't even match before the season to give ourselves a breather. I think there were only 2 wars that we didn't push in the off season.
Okay.
Because we had to keep going. We had to get that rating up, and we ended up getting it up to. We actually ended up 2 wars short of tier 1. We didn't realize it. I think that number moves just based on how many alliances are in what tiers and whatever.
It's definitely a percentage.
Yeah. And so we ended up. We ended up 2 wars short. So our first 2 wins during the season were under the tier 2 multiplier, and then our third one was under the tier 1 multiplier.
Okay.
But all's well that ends well. It's just we were like, oh no, we were 2 away.
So you and the officers are sort of always in the back end. I think you said you talk a lot on the phone rather than on chatting because it's faster, that you can go through so much more information in a shorter amount of time.
We do. I think we started these officer conference calls early on with. I think Discord made it very easy for us, but we started these and they helped a lot. I was saying in the farewell video, I started maybe halfway through the season. And we started the calls right away, but even like halfway through the season, Shuntai and I would be on a conference call placing our defenses, and then when our BG3 lead was tied up because he was going to school as well, we were planning the BG3 moves. We would do that as well. So I'd be like, all right, well, see you in 20 minutes. Let's plan our BGs and then jump back on call and plan theirs based on rosters and what we're seeing. And it was
a lot of work.
It was a lot. It was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah.
But it helped. It helped a lot to be able to do that via audio rather than.
I'm sure.
Rather than
it's so clear that
the
audio helps like immensely. You know.
I agree. I think it's big. And then with people. Especially after you plan paths, people have all sorts of questions and all that. So if you're having to do all that, once in a while, you and I would jump on call rather than because everybody's kind of hitting you up and saying, oh, well, what do you think about this node or this node? Or, you try to give notes for what people should watch out for. But people have questions, and audio definitely makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, just as a member, it was, you're sitting there, one of 10 guys in a battle group, one of 30 in Alliance, and just based on all the officer announcements, from a member's perspective, you're just thinking they don't want any deaths, especially on the easier lanes. And I definitely had one of the easier lanes. And so I was just thinking, okay, look, I know I can't do 0 prep. And I don't want to just be chatting with Cade all night trying to plan a war. So if I just hop on a call for 10 minutes, we'll knock it out. Definitely. And then I can do all the offline planning. And then he won't have to think about Path 8 until, the next war.
Well, and the truth is, as a BG lead, like you don't have all the answers. You know the paths decently well, but I mean, 2 heads are better than 1, right? And so for paths that I hadn't,
2 people, not even your officer.
Definitely, I like for paths I didn't know. I would be like, okay, let's do this together. Like this is what I'm thinking. This is what I see. But you've taken like dirt, like he's taken 9 for most of the season. I'm like, you tell me, like, what does this note actually feel like? Because I'd never taken 9.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go back and forth and try to find great options. And most of the time, you do a decent job and you'd find the right stuff. But there were certainly some wars where I'm like, okay, I wish I would have had that combo back, because I would have made some different decisions and it would have saved us some bonuses. But
yeah.
It's kind of part of it. You're kind of responsible for, advising people, and you tried to be 100%. But
yeah. I definitely was more always looking for sort of what went wrong in the past up in these higher tiers. A lot of, at least in the lower tiers on the easier paths, you don't get tough defenders, but you do get those defenders in Master and Tier 1.
People get very, very. It's either they have high level champs, which a lot of the Master Alliances do, or they're very smart about their placement. You run into some alliances where you're like, oh my gosh, man, I would have never thought about this, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, once you're fighting
or they
against
have both. Yeah, and if they do, then it's really the planning goes a long, long way. The scouting you do for the battle group and the scouting everybody else does, and the questions they ask before they get going. I think scouting, boosting, duels, that's the formula, man. Like, as long as you've got the skill, as long as you're one of those people that you can run cleanly if you do everything in your power. I think that's the recipe, and it's the reason a bunch of, like, the battle groups did really well. Like BG2, I remember going low death all the time. We went 3 deaths, 2 deaths in a few of the wars. Like, it's all planning. Like, that was always my goal. Let's go 5 deaths minus against this defense, and I think the planning helps a ton.
Definitely. So how about matchmaking? What did you guys put any thought into matchmaking?
We did. Okay, so it basically what you do, and it's an interesting field, because in this, and I've got a lot of buddies in some of the other high end alliances, and it seems like it's a topic that everybody kind of views differently. But there are alliances out there that hit up their connections and say, okay, when do these top ones match? Or there are, some top alliances that it seems like they don't ever play each other. I don't know. I don't want to say too much.
This
but
is
it just
this
seems
is a
like
gray area. You don't have to. I'll just go out and say it, that, like, there is quote unquote collusion. It exists, but it's not clear how wrong it is. There's some disagreement. I personally don't like it. I think that we should just let the chips fall where they may. But I understand the temptation. It's especially if your officers are busy and they're about to hit the matchmaking button. Is it worth a just quick check? Hey, did these guys match yet? Well, that'd be nice to know before I hit this button.
My view on it, and you're talking about collusion when it comes to matchmaking. I think it like, for me, my big thing, and it happens with all sorts of stuff. It's there's a lot of defensive trading and all that. All the master alliances, the high end alliances, and I would recommend for any alliance you keep a very good record of the defenders you faced as you're facing them, because you're going to run into those kinds of defenders. You're going to run into that alliance again, and it'll give you a great starting point to where you know a majority of their placements. Yeah. But people take it a step further, and there's this whole big defensive trading thing. And beyond that, a lot of the high-end alliances are also, not all of them, certainly not all of them, and the ones that I'm closest to and the ones that I admire the most do not do any of that.
Yeah.
But they just know when everybody matches, so they just avoid all of those times. And that's why at the end of the season, you get somebody like us. We faced 8 master alliances out of 12 matches. And man, I feel like 4 or 5 of them were top 7. Oh, God, it was like, so you're like, oh, come on.
And I don't want to, I'm not trying to like call out any leadership here, because sometimes it's unavoidable. You have 30 members, and sometimes you just hear it through the grapevine. Someone says, hey, they matched. I know, because my buddy is in that alliance.
Oh, and there's nothing.
That happened to me. That happened to me a couple times, and I didn't know what to do with the information, but you're just talking, and then the leadership, are you intentionally going to go in and make a mistake? Once you have this information, you sort of you work with it.
I think for me, and it was a tricky line, and I'm very happy to not have to.
I think you did it well, man.
To navigate those things.
I think you towed it well.
Thanks so much.
I felt very clean about the whole like everything just felt really moral.
Thank you, dude. I think the sleep that you get at night is more important than any
Totally.
Silly extra T5B shards. I think it's just one of those, like, do it in a way that you would be proud of having done it, and you do your best. It doesn't mean that you make all of the right decisions all the time, but you're certainly trying to, and you're trying to make every single decision as morally as you can.
Yeah.
And I think it's for matchmaking, I think it's absolutely. It makes a lot of sense to go based on your own experience. Like, when people match just based on when you match them, that's fine. Keep track of that, just like you keep track of the defenses you face. It gets gray when and it's the same with, like, somebody's streaming. Like, I knew generally that a team like For Loki matched later than us because Brian was usually streaming when they would match, and that's fine. That's public.
This is all scouting.
Info.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Whereas if you get just having like a list of being like, hey, when do these ones match? And you get a list, you're like, I just wish that wasn't happening, because you get some alliances that will have matched.
And then you have the most egregious, which is two let's just say leaders privately messaging and wait
to dodge
each other.
Exactly.
So there's
and
definitely different levels of it.
To me, that's not being competitive. That's just being scared to face alliances on your level. Like, there's no you run into alliances once in a while that are they're better alliances than you, and they're winning, and maybe somebody's struggling against a certain node, and then they also, just because out of the goodness of their heart, take time to jump into AW chat and try to mock as well. And it's that kind of stuff. I never understood what the like, not facing alliances on your level or beating alliances that are weaker than you and then boasting about it is. To me, that's not competitiveness. To me, that's being scared poopless of actually having a competitive schedule, or, having the strength of schedule that you should with the defenders you have, with the players you have, and the way that you're running your lanes.
Yeah.
So it's certainly not even. There's a big difference between those, and you'll see it. There's a big gap even between the skill level, like the top 5 or the champs in the skill level, top 5, top 10, and then the 11 through 20. And so it makes a big difference in 11 through 20 if you have 8 master matchups or 4 master matchups,
Yeah.
And like the rankings don't tell the whole story, because there were teams that end up above us that just had a different strength of schedule.
Yeah. Our story, the Scrolls, us being sort of in master for so long, despite some of the losses we had, was interesting to me. It was interesting to see how that works, because we were facing some pretty intense alliances, but we were putting up good points. So those points with a good multiplier, and the reason our multiplier stayed in tier 1 was because we were facing these alliances that were so much stronger than us that our war rating didn't change.
I think we were in a good I think we were in a good spot. I think the hairiest, aside from finishing the season and having to win against Zeus, who's a great alliance, and it was a rematch.
Oh, that was the best war ever. But yeah,
dude, it felt so good. It was I would have written it exactly the same way, if I had it over again. Like, it was stressful at the time, but it's exactly the way I would have wanted it to end. But I think the hairiest part besides that was we faced VK, who was a great group. That Russian alliance, and it was a +10, -55 for us. We lose that war, and we drop to tier 2, and that's master. That's the season.
Gone.
We don't have time to get back in there. And they had surprisingly good defenders, all hidden. I don't know if maybe they had some ex-master retirees in there or what have you. I just remember us running sloppy. And me being like, wow, I'm watching an implosion. Like, all the officers were like, what is happening? Like, what is happening to us right now?
That was a high-death war for both teams, wasn't it?
We had to... What's that?
That was a high-death war, I think, for both teams.
Dude, it was nuts. And I think we had to clear the last 14 nodes. We didn't know exactly, like, we were still counting diversity and stuff, but we had to clear the last 14 nodes deathless, including 3 bosses. And we knew we maybe had 1... bonus. It turned out that we had 2 or 3 to play with.
Yeah.
But dude, we cleared all of them deathless, and then soloed 2 of the 3 bosses. One of the bosses was a time. It was an almost solo.
Epic.
And still pulled it out. But that was the season. And it's so stressful when it has to come down to, like, okay, well, we died to some diversity stuff, so now let's solo these bosses in order to to win this.
And so just something else I noticed here, just as you were talking, is that knowing where you stand at all times is very useful, because I think that a lot of alliances, they may not realize when they're, maybe in Master everyone realizes it, but in sort of Plat 1 or Plat 2, if your goal is to hang on to where you are, maybe even down in Gold 1, you might not realize that you're fighting for the season in one war. It could just totally slip your mind that you're going to drop a tier, or that this is the winning war that's going to keep you in the bracket you want to stay in. It's quite hard to do all those maths in the background and be on top of all that.
Well, and I think it gets a little bit easier. We have a spreadsheet that we use. Earlier in the season, we weren't necessarily going... like our diversity number would change. And so we had a spreadsheet that we kept just based on who we were facing and all that. And then we kept pushing it up higher and higher. It was a balancing act, right? Because you wanted to play strong defenders when you had certain defenders you still had at 345. But then as you were ranking up, all of a sudden you're like, okay, let's push this diversity up. It was always decently high, but we kept pushing it up.
Yeah.
It's easier to track if you know both, and you never know, but you can suspect based on past matchups. If you know both teams are at full diversity, then it just comes down to deaths. But if you are not at full diversity, then you start subtracting, 30 per diversity point and all that. So it's very important to know their diversity. Very important to keep, or to know your what you're facing, their diversity once you've cleared the map, because you're keeping the defenses. And it's an easy copy and paste, right? Copy, put your champ in, how many times you died, whatever. And you've got a record of their defense, but you also know at the end when both maps are clear, if you've won or not. You don't have to wait like 4 hours and be like, well, who knows?
Yeah, totally. So how about your own defense? When do you decide which, I know that we would get messages, when the defense was ready. And sometimes it was just same defense, but sometimes it changed. So when do you make that decision? Do you make the decision of which defense you're going to place after you see the match, the plus and minus?
We kept, because we were, as we were kind of honing things throughout the season, like we were pretty happy with placements. When we could, it's the reason we would say, okay, here's the sheet, is if you get somebody new in, you've got to all of a sudden do the spreadsheet again, right? Yeah. So to account for diversity and all that. So that's when you have to do the spreadsheet, and then
how do you account?
Everybody's just placed randomly, and same defenses was nice when nothing changed because you already had the nodes, so you could just post the screenshots. People would be placed where they need to, and then you've got like 5 minutes of adjustments if you want to change stuff. The way we would do it, they changed a lot during the season because of the rank ups, because of some of the movement.
Right.
And then because when you're facing alliances that, for the reasons we talked about earlier, will have your defense, and it's a higher end alliance.
So you want to make some
changes.
You're
like, well, you're like, let's try to surprise them in a different way. They're going to expect everything. So the only thing we have going, because we don't have the 565 thing going for us like so many do, we were placing some, but not as many as some of these really high end great alliances. We're like, what we have is the element of surprise. So let's try to think through some stuff. Let's try to surprise them on some nodes. See what we can do to squeeze out some extra bonuses.
Yeah, and you did.
we tried.
Sometimes, and masteries have a lot to do with that too. Because I remember somebody made an announcement once about unfazed, and how do you enforce that, or not enforce? Like, it wasn't a requirement, but it was like, let's make sure that we're placing good defenses, not only the champions, but also the masteries behind the champions. So, how do you check on that?
I think we were lucky that we had a group that knew exactly what our goals are, and everybody, I don't think I really had to have many conversations about, like, well, I like this mastery setup, but you're saying this, but I kind of am going to keep this. Like, that's especially when you're trying to do so much.
Nobody was saying that. Yeah.
It's not what you would want to hear. But everybody knew we were kind of, working towards the same goal, so I think it really helped. I think stuff like Max Limber is kind of almost a requirement. Like, you keep it in your builds. I think willpower, I go back and forth. I like it offensively. Defensively, it's fine. I mean, it's great. I don't know. Maybe it's just because the champs I'm clearing with, I don't get much use out of it. But defensively, I mean, I like willpower because I can also spec through physical resistance, which I like a lot. But I think Unfazed is a very easy, I know Brian calls them like 1-point wonder. I think it's a very easy way to maybe counter the Sparks, right, who are evading all the time. So you just never know. You've got a bleed champ. They evade or they dash in when they're unstoppable. You get a bleed on him, and all of a sudden he's bleeding out, and he doesn't have an answer. Like it's just those simple things where you can squeeze out a bunch of extra. And it's a decently useful offensive mastery too. But you can squeeze out a bunch of extra bonuses throughout the season. Maybe, right? It's the same with Mystic Dispersion, right? Like somebody went like high MD Voodoo. I mean, Sparky's going to be evading a lot.
Yeah.
And so you put Unfazed on that fight, all of a sudden you've just got more stuff going for what would otherwise be a diversity defender.
I don't know. How did you guys decide on the diversity? I know you said it was based on you were just slowly increasing it over time, but what was making you do that increase of diversity over time? Just the points you needed?
Well, so if you look at the points, a diversity, like an offensive death is worth almost 3 diversity points. Mm-hmm. So we've always said this since the old scrolls. If you can guarantee a kill by doubling a great defender, then it's worth it.
Yeah.
Because you're only going to get 30 extra points by not doubling them, but you're going to get 80 if that defender gets a kill.
Right.
Now, when you're facing Master Alliances, there's no such thing as being able to guarantee a kill even with a 565
you
double.
You can't guarantee it. I mean, you even if you could add an entire boss node and place the boss twice, you might not get any kills.
Agreed. And I think that's the thing. If you get those, you can shift it. Certainly, we had a lot of combos about this trying to navigate it. If you shift for lower ranked alliances, which you're like, well, we could probably guarantee. I mean, these guys are maybe a Plat 1 or something. Mm-hmm. If you shift for that, like you could justify it. If you're facing Master Alliances, it just seems like, unless you're sure, and I don't think there's such a thing, it does make sense as your defense, if it's strong enough to go max diversity, it makes sense to squeeze out all of those points, because at least you're like, well, we're getting 30 points for sure. We don't know if we're going to get the 80 from the kill, but we're getting 30 for sure. And that way, you kind of know, numbers vary, mm-hmm. but if you're you're facing an alliance where you suspect they're also going max diversity, there is something to be said about feeling like if you don't go max, you're starting at a disadvantage. Totally. You can't just watch the deaths.
Yeah, and it's nice to know where you stand and just focus on attack.
Exactly. So that's the thing. It was a tough thing. We had some convos in officer chat about it. There's disagreements and things like that. But I think ultimately, we ended up with a decent system we were really happy with. And truth is, we had one Platinum 1 alliance in all of the last 2 weeks while we were trying to lock master, and so it just made sense for us to keep pushing diversity up.
Mm-hmm. So we're getting to the best section, the attack.
Okay. All right.
So I've been going through a sort of outline, of topics to lead us to the juicy part, which is
definitely
attack phase. So every single war, mm-hmm. this was just all this planning and preparation. There's 24 hours before this war of planning that went into, the matchmaking, the defense, everything. And then all of a sudden the war starts. Yeah. What happens? How do you divvy up the lanes? I know I ran the same lane practically the whole season, but I think there were some changes, war to war. And how did you guys go about that?
I think if we would have had all of the rosters to feel very happy with, everybody could handle the same lanes regardless of what they saw. Yeah. I think, and this is just kind of my personal thing on it, I would have much rather kept everybody on the same lanes. Mm-hmm. Now, mostly because of rosters, because of what you see on defense, and not everybody's equipped to do everything, I think familiarity is huge. So I think with us, I tried for a majority of the season to keep people on about the same lanes because they're familiar with them. Yeah. I had 2 guys that I would switch often. I would switch them, but they would only switch between 2 paths based on what I was seeing just because of rosters. So, based on what I saw on this lane and this lane, like, do I want A on A and B on B, mm-hmm. or do I want A on B and B on A? They were familiar with both paths, and I felt comfortable enough doing that. Sometimes you'll have somebody with the right champs for things, but the other guy is just a little bit more skilled, and so you're having to kind of assess that, and the decision you make is either going to pay off or not for the whole alliance or the whole battle group at least.
And so you as soon as attack phase started, you're looking at the map and you're looking at the mini bosses and you're looking at the previous lane assignments, thinking, okay, this person has this attack team. Are we putting them in the best situation?
And I think it's key to. I think that's why it was tricky when we would have to cover for the other BG lead, just because he was busy. Because I'm like, I don't know your guys' rosters off the top of my head. Like, we're referencing them and all that. I don't know your skill levels off the top of my head. It's always best to have the BG leader who knows his battle group inside and out making those decisions. Not only do you not have to look up rosters, you know exactly what everyone's running with, what options they have, but you know their skill levels and what they're comfortable with. So I'm looking at the boss, I'm looking at the minis, I'm looking at the key nodes and saying, okay, I bet that's that. I bet that's that. I want to make sure that we hedge against, like, what if that's that person? This guy doesn't have that. And so I want to make sure that, like, where else could that champ be? You're really wanting to make sure that everybody's set up very well for those surprise nodes, those potential ones. And you get a good feel for who is going to be on what node. You're just kind of like, obviously you can scout profiles and all that kind of stuff as well. But you try to do the most thorough job to make sure everybody's set up for everything. So if I can leave somebody on the lane they're always on because they're handling it fine, that's what I'm always leaning towards. Mm-hmm. But I'm still checking the lane and saying, okay, well, what if that's that champ? Like, if that's that champ, they're not going to have an answer to it. So if I need to make a switch, I will. But having said that, I think my opinion is that if you can keep people on lanes they're familiar with, so they can, you can kind of work together and they can get to know the lane. Yeah. And you can make intelligent recommendations to them, and they know those fights. I think you'll see fewer deaths throughout the season. And we had to run very, very clean because we knew
even during losses.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Because you're having to max points. We had a couple wars early and even late where we made a decision. We were like, well, let's just give up these last couple bonuses on the boss just because we really need to win these last two and we need to save all of our boosts. And but generally you're wanting to save every single boost, and especially on the tier 1 multiplier, you never know what it's going to come down to. And so even if it's a loss, but we knew we were running up against tougher defenses than they were, so we had to run like doubly clean, compared to maybe what they're running. And so familiarity is big. But you have to look out for potential sticking points. Like, you don't want anybody losing a bonus or two on a node that they wouldn't otherwise, or somebody else with the right champ wouldn't otherwise lose. Right? That's such a waste. Yeah.
And would you assign players to mini bosses and the boss even before the war start, like before attack phase really got underway, or would you sort of react in the moment to who was going to take each mini?
It depends. A majority of it, I already know who I'm going to want on the minis. Obviously, they're waiting to be cleared at the end or to be directed at the end. I knew 9 was going to take that mini most of the time. I was looking for, like, I was thinking about their path and the mini for their roster. I knew Void was generally going to take regen mini unless it was someone else. That mini I feel like is almost a throwaway, especially if you put a regener on there, you're playing right into the Voids who are already on path 6 or 7 or both. Yeah. And then middle mini would generally be a toss-up. I'd see who had the health at the end of the map. For me, I already knew, just because of my path, that I was going to go through that other mini. And then it was the same with 1. I would always plan for 1 taking that mini. I'd plan for their path, but also for that mini. Yeah. So 1 and 9 for sure were taking those. Void was probably taking regen mini. And then...
2 and 8 would be sort of
I
back
didn't take
up.
Stun Immune Mini from 3, yeah. Just because it was a dorm, someone had a Gulk. I was like, well, yeah, you do this. Yeah. But I think generally, yeah, that middle one was the one that was more of a toss-up I'd see at the end of the map. But usually I'm thinking of the minis as well as the other nodes when I'm picking and the mid-map minis too.
The mid ones, yeah.
Because if you see something where you're like, well, I don't really like this matchup, like you're trying to get the right person on that path. For me, again, there was only 2 lanes that I would switch up, and that worked fine. One of them was 4, and it was the the complete debuff immune mini.
Yeah.
And between the two of the guys that I would switch on there, they had enough champs to take just about anybody there. So.
Yeah, that is. The mini bosses are definitely, especially that middle one, 29, is where the
dude.
bonuses start going away. So it's just interesting to see, because 29 in almost every alliance is taken. That's like the last node that's fought. Even sometimes the boss goes down before node 29. So it's just those mini bosses. It's interesting, and so okay.
Well, and I think especially with stuff like 29, we had champs. I think every battle group had a champ. I'm thinking of one in particular, but that was the answer to that based on how you're boosting.
Yeah.
And it ain't Corvus. But not everybody who had that champ at the correct rank had the skill to or maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but they were certainly untested, and you don't want to send them against the toughest node in the game to test
Untested,
that
I
interaction
think,
for the first time.
I think, was it the first? I think you had me take 29 once. The first war, I think, that I joined.
Did I?
Yeah.
Did I have you? I think I did have you on 5 once.
Because I remember it was a Mephisto, and you said go in
yeah.
with Blade, and I was like, are you sure?
Yeah.
And then we
yeah.
went, and then I think after that death, because it wasn't even a 565 Blade, and so then it was just like, oh, okay. I think it was kind of as we were figuring out how bad was node 29 really.
I think so, and I
really
think
bad.
we were also very limited in roster. We hadn't hit our sweet spot. That's like who's got answers for this.
Yeah.
And it is kind of silly. They moved 29 and 30, and there's no other way to get to 29 from 4 or 6.
Right.
Like you have to be on path 5 or the backup.
Well, I can see
So
the reason.
it is kind of
the logic I think behind that move was if you don't want to fight it, you can leave it up.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. It's just I wish they would open up the gates as well. And I know there's people who wish they wouldn't have ever switched 29 and 30. But like as far as flip-flop them, but it's probably a combo for another time, but I think it's still an over-tweaked node, and I would hope that they would switch it up. But we had other because the problem isn't Killmonger on that note. The problem is 565 Sig 200 Killmonger and the reverb damage, and how can you down that fight before you die? Yeah. And there are only 2 answers that I know of that they're certain, like for sure solos. I don't know. We didn't have too much experience in our battle group with a 565 Corvus. Not really sure if he can solo, but maybe he can. But we had him in other battle groups, people who could one-shot that fight. Mm-hmm. We didn't in ours. And so sometimes you're like, well, we've got the right champ. Do we send that person with that champ there, even though they've never seen it, and have them spec a certain way? Or do we say, you know what, we're going to lose a bonus there, but as long as we don't lose a bonus, or 2 sometimes, you never know. Sometimes it goes cleaner than others.
Yeah.
But as long as we don't lose them here and here,
we'll be okay.
We'll be okay. We're willing to make that. So obviously, you don't want to lose any bonuses, but when you're limited roster-wise,
it's sometimes it's that tough node, and it's a make or break moment, and it's like if we don't do this in 2 deaths, if we do it in 3, we lose the war. But if we do it in 2 deaths, we win the war. Dude, and it's just what do you tell the player who's about to go into that situation? How do you? I know that you would say stuff in the group chats, but I had a feeling you were PMing them as well. And
I mean, we've been in it for bosses. It's just kind of like, I don't know, like you're like, this node, you've got it, dude. Here's the thing, like you level with them, you know what they have. I've had a few boss killers, even in the old scrolls, and you're like, all right, dude, do your thing. Like I need you to solo. Like don't grab as many duels as you want. You've got it. Like it's not. Don't even worry about it. I don't want you to stress. But go do your thing.
But we need the solo.
People can do it, yeah. But what do it's not like you're putting a I believe in you, but here's what's on the line kind of pressure on it. You're not like, hey, you better get the solo. You're just like, this is what the numbers look like.
Man up and do your thing.
Yeah, exactly. And certainly there's times when you I've been in those situations several times. There's times when you fail. I don't know. Maybe I was lucky that I never failed where the win was on the line. Because that really feels terrible. But there's times when you're like, well, I need a solo that's take pressure off of things, and you don't. You time out, or you die at the end, or you die in the middle. And you're like, that just really feels terrible. But you have to kind of put all of us are running off of ego, pure unleaded ego. Yep. And so I think it's very tough to kind of brush that off and be like, okay, well, we got to focus on what's the job at hand and focus on that. So it's tough. Like I think, I don't know, you do it for those moments, but you're not like, when you're in that, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's coming down to this, Yeah. So luckily, most of the time people come through. They do their thing. They do what they need to do. And as long as they're confident, they know they can handle it.
It speaks to going back all the way to recruitment, getting the right guys in there who maybe they do have a little bit of nerves, but they're the type of person that steps up in the moment to take the win.
I agree.
It's
I
cool.
think
it's very cool to see.
You don't have to worry about it. You know that they care about running cleanly as much as you do. And that's really ideally what you want, because you're not going to convince people to practice. You notice this throughout the game. There's two kinds of attitudes in this game. There's, well, this champ's really hard. Looks like I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Or that I'm not getting it. I heard a lot with this Emma Frost thing. People are like, well, I stink at this, so it looks like no uncollected rewards for me. I never understood that. I never understood the fatalistic.
It's just like
you seal
that's
your
what
fate
energy
before.
refills are for. I'll try again. And
dual chips, man, and everything. I'm like, I think the endgame players are like, okay, maybe I'm not a boss killer yet, but that's my next target. So how do I become one, and how do I become a reliable one, and quickly?
That's definitely one thing from. So as someone who was in Plat 3 and then straight. That my next experience was in Master. It was the one thing I noticed is before my dual credits would expire all the time, and now I never have. Well, I have a healthy stash of dual credits, but I never let them expire. If there ever some that are getting low, I say, you know what, I'm gonna spend 15-20 minutes dueling Iron Man Infinity War with a champion that maybe I don't normally take against him, or something maybe dueling Korg nowadays.
Definitely,
it's just the practice and the duels were everything to me.
It's all muscle memory and familiar.
I think I dueled MODOK like 60 times during that season. It's MODOK's a joke now. I don't think there's a MODOK that I would die to on any node.
Yeah. It's the way. It's such a simple thing, and I know people who save units are going to cringe, but I spent so many units on duels. Part of it is just because of the nature of my lane and who I had to take, and I always wanted to be fresh before each new fight. But I spent. People joke when people are like, "Hey," we do some giveaways on the channel and stuff, and they're like, "Hey, I'd like to give something away to you," and they're like, "What do you want?" And well, first I try to refuse, but then I'm like, dual credits, please. Like it's a joke. It's like the troll donation, but I'm like, hey, no, like, especially with how I didn't get, I didn't get to grind much during the season, and a lot of the milestone stuff that you get from grinding a bunch that comes with dual credits. I had to miss out on a lot of that.
Yeah.
A lot of like the science combat, different class combats, all those. Like I'd run out of dual credits, and I'm like, well, I'm not done dueling. Like. Just keep going. And the truth is, I mean, dude, it's 20 duels to make one health potion. I promise you, if you grab 20 duels, you're not going to use that health potion. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing. People, you see people not at this level, but at the lower levels, just week after week after week saying, I'm not ready yet. And I'm like, dude, you being ready is 40 duels away. Like, if you're telling me you're not ready after we've had this convo before, again, no hard feelings, but you're telling me that you don't practice.
Right.
And as a guitar teacher, like, it's very tough for somebody to convince me of the process of mastering a skill, and how it ties into practice. Like, there's nobody out there who's practiced 1,000 times and still doesn't have the fight.
Right.
Well,
dude,
I don't know.
Congrats, you made it. The Alliance came out in Master Bracket. You got all of us a few extra Tier 2 Alpha shards, Tier 5 Basic shards. It was a good feeling. I'm repping that title for sure.
It's so nuts. I'd forgotten about the title until like just before, and it was. It felt so good at the end of it. It was just like this 2-month journey of nonstop, stuff. I mean. Even splitting the alliances and making the Discord server into a 60-person server the day after the last season ended, it didn't stop after that. And so to hit our goal, it felt so. I was so proud of all the guys. I mean, everybody just played their butts off, did everything we asked them to. I don't know.
It's a good
I remember
feeling.
people along the line saying like, "Well, why don't you guys aim for plat 1?" And I'm like, "Cause I'm not interested in reasonable goals. That's why. Like, whatever. Set the goal and then play up.
If you're not a winner, what are you?
Exactly. If you ain't first, you're last. You know what I mean? So
yeah, even though we were 18, but it felt like first, didn't it?
It felt like we were ninth at one point, but I think a lot of that comes down to matchups
goals.
too. Like a few different matchups, and that 11 through 20 ends up looking a lot different.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
just
so
getting into
that
bracket is a huge victory.
I agree. Yeah. I agree, and it's not the rewards. I think it's just setting out to accomplish that goal and accomplishing it. It just it felt so good after everything we went through and the way that it all went down. Again, I wouldn't have written it any other way. It was such a great
it was a saga,
and knowing that this was going to be it for leading and for doing that, it was the perfect send off too. Just so proud of every single person in there. I think we would have made maybe a couple of other switches had there not been like the 5 war cutoff. We were still in the middle of doing that. But I was very happy with the crew we ended up with, and everybody took care of things. So
no matter how it went, it worked out. It was the crew that got it done.
And it was so fun to get to play with some, like with you and I mean, of course, with everybody. But I'm saying like you and Hobbit and Dooley and some of the YouTubers that came in, in the season. Like it was such a nice like memory to have us all getting to play together too.
Couldn't agree more. Well, anyway, dude, thanks for spilling the beans. Telling us all the secrets about what it took. No
problem.
Because the back end, it sounds like it was a lot. It definitely was. You've confirmed it. It was a lot of work, and you don't just find yourself in at the top 0.1% of alliances. You bust your butt to get there.
Dude, thank you so much. The officers were phenomenal too. So I don't ever. I always kind of want to footnote everything with that because they did so much work. Yeah. Like it's not people are like, oh, Cade, yeah, but like there was it was everybody was doing so much, like
100%. The officers did really well. Like they were always available to talk to. I PM'd every once in a while to ask questions. But you had a lot on your shoulders, just you, and if you would have gotten a big chunk of the blame if we didn't make it. So take the credit where it comes, The leader usually gets the credit when it's good and the blame when it's bad.
It was amazing. I hope this was helpful, dude. I hope that we answered some questions for people. I would say if you're thinking about doing something like this, if you're thinking about making a push or even just improving your alliance, your organization is going to be huge. Spreadsheets, rosters, all that sort of stuff. We had color-coded roster spreadsheets. We'll have to put those out sometime, not with people's champs, but just as a tool for people to use. It showed you like bird's eye view of your strength of your rosters and your defenses, organization, duels, scouting, and just I think a common goal. And you guys, I mean, I think people can do a lot more than they give themselves credit for. I think your job as a leader is just to set the goal and believe that every single person can accomplish it, know it beyond a shadow of a doubt, and you end up there. Life has a way. So